Hi, I'm Dr. Gemma, and welcome back to Cognitive, the Knitting Psychology podcast. Cheerfully and somewhat irregularly in business since 2008. Segments today may include what's on my hooks, needles, and spindles, a strategy, something I really like, put a lid on it, oh shoot, and blather. So sit back, put your feet up, pick up your knitting, crocheting, spinning, weaving, or dyeing, or any other yarny thing you're doing, and get ready to enjoy. Well, hello there, it's Dr. Gemma. Welcome to episode 116 of the Cognitive Podcast. I'm recording here on February 6, 2023 at 4:30 p.m. on a very sunny, warm, breezy afternoon in beautiful Acton in the desert. I have so many nice things to tell you this week. It's been pretty happy, especially last night, but I will get to that. Your comments are very welcome. You can comment on the blog at cognitivepodcast.blogspot.com or on our group on Ravelry. Please be aware that I will not be adding you to any of my social media accounts because I'm getting spammed so heavily. I'm not one of these hardy souls who's willing to deal with all these idiotic advertising comments. I keep my accounts locked because of my job description and the risk there. So I'm really sorry about that. You can contact me through the podcast blog, as I've just said, or on Ravelry. Meanwhile, in the warm thanks department, thank you, Cheryl W., for your generous coffee. I really appreciate those. I don't pay a lot for the podcast. I'm going to be honest here. I pay a monthly fee to Libsyn, and I forget how much it is. But it's not humongous. But I really appreciate those anyway, because I don't do advertising. I have nothing against people who choose to do advertising, but I do not have the time. And I have to admit, I find it annoying, although I can't understand why you do it. So the goal here is to never go to advertising. The other goal here, weird as it sounds, is never to get into a growth model. I don't need to grow the podcast, but I'm sure grateful when a new person shows up, like Gooseberry Lane 22. Wow, that first cardie is adorable. And what I really like about it, first of all, this is, for the rest of you who don't know Gooseberry Lane 22, let me introduce you, Gooseberry, everybody else, Gooseberry. She's retired and she just started crocheting in January of 2022 and then got knitting needles for Christmas, bless your hubs, and started knitting in 2023. If anybody has checked recently, we've only had about 5 weeks of 2023. So she made this just adorable mini cardie. I think it's mini, looking at the scale next to the beautiful table runner. What's amazing is how many skills are on that cardie. It's really, really cute. But I was so impressed because if you could make that Gooseberry Lane 22, you can make anything you want. I mean, you've got really every challenging skill available on that thing, except maybe lace work, But that is a pretty impressive project. So that's really, really well done. And so if you want to make sweaters, girlfriend, you are there. May I heartily recommend the brick, which is available on Ravelry, and I sure as heck hope you are on Ravelry. Meanwhile, DC Elaine Knits put in this really nice reminder. She commented that she did a bit of a stash toss this past week and found just a garbage bag full of scraps. Now, to me, I have to admit, before I could even knit with a garbage bag, I guess a trash bag, you know what I mean, full of scraps, I'd have to throw it on the ground and roll in it, because to me it's like, wow, Scrap City, I am so happy. I'm going to make this and this and this and this. But Elaine did it the smart way. She just donated it to people who needed it, to, in this case, a middle school. And that is a really great use of your scraps. I have to say, I used to work at a skilled nursing facility, alias a nursing home. And we had a significant young geriatric population who did want to knit and crochet. And they had an arts program. You know what they didn't have? Yarn. and needles and crochet hooks. So I would tell you one of the great places to donate is to local nursing facilities or to schools or to Mother Bear. They will take it all. And also, don't forget, if you have too many hooks floating around or too many needles, those can go too. They appreciate them. So well done, Elaine. DC Elaine Knits. Nicely done. And what else? Let's see. Well, you know what I'm going to say about COVID, right? I know, we're all tired of COVID. And it's interesting, I went shopping at a local grocery at Trader Joe's. And it was an interesting mix of masked and unmasked people. And I find that very comforting. And I will talk also about my meanderings today later on. So, you know, if you're going to wear your mask, that's great. Remember, in a crowded place, you have to decide really, do you want a cold? Do you want the flu? Do you want RSV? Do you want some miscellaneous respiratory yuck? So it's not just about COVID anymore. This is a good time of year to be wearing a mask. And just general, I don't feel like catching something disgusting. At any rate, you know the drill at this point, and the links you need for free COVID tests and for a vaccine record if you're in California, that's all in the show notes. So let's meander on to what is on my hooks and needles. Oh, I so thought I was going to finish one of my major projects last night, and I'm a little heartbroken, but I was listening to the last episode, and it is amazing how much in 1 week my goals shift in terms of my creative stuff. So this past week, I got really hooked into finishing the Wrapped in Tiny Chains cardigan, which is crochet. And I got so close. What happened was I did finish it, except I tried to do the edging. And this is really simple. It's just a single crochet around the outer edge. And it was too taut, too tight. And so I ripped all that out. And now it is sitting in a sad hunk on the back of the chair I'm rocking in as I record this. However, let me tell you something. This is a great pattern. I mean, it's as minimal as it can be, that the person making it does not do all the math the way she should. There are pieces that are too big. Some of it, towards the end, I couldn't figure out some of the things she was even saying. However, it's a very popular project, and I can see why. First of all, this is your basic rectangles project. I have avoided these since I began knitting back in like 2002 or 2003, not to mention crocheting in about 2005, I think, or 2006, I can't remember. I've always avoided this, but I have to tell you, I finally broke down because I've been doing so much seaming lately when I've been working on the Don't Know Yet blanket. And so I saw this, I can't even think where, it popped up in my Instagram feed or something, because crocheters don't have a big Ravelry presence. So I know I didn't find this one on Ravelry. I know I just bumped into it accidentally. The designer does a lot of stuff, and she has her own groups off Ravelry called Crochet or Crocheting Done Right, which made me a little nervous, like, oh no, is there a political message there? I know, we're all nervous these days. I don't think so, but at any rate, I saw this and I thought, boy, that's really cute, and it looks really easy. All right, now the reason it looks easy though, you make a big rectangle for the back, you make two smaller rectangles for the front panels, there's no buttons, there's no closure. Then you make two smaller rectangles for the arms and two little squares for the patch pockets if you want them. I mean, this couldn't get easier. And this should probably take maybe 2 weekends. So, of course, I took 5 months on it because I just got bored after I finished the back of it. And I said, oh, I could do those front panels really quickly. No, I couldn't. The next thing that went on with this was I said, this is going to be way too big for me. No, it's not. The sizes are accurate except for the arms. So one thing I would tell you before you do the arms on this, she even says she thinks the large and extra large arms are too big. I think that's because she's increasing. I think she probably crocheted a medium for herself or something, and then she just did sort of proportionate math to get the other sizes. And it works everywhere but on the arms. But at any rate, my arms are at least 4 inches too long. However, I thought it was cute to roll them up and clip them into place, and I will tack them down. so that you have these permanent fluffy cuffs. And I thought it came out looking very nice. So I was worried about this kind of project because I knew I didn't want to do that kind of seaming. And I thought, oh, it'll take me weeks to do the seaming. It took maybe about an hour and a half. Why? Because I've gotten so cold-hearted about doing seams because of the don't know yet blanket. I am totally over my fears of mattress stitch. So the reason I'm saying all this is if you want to do the Wrapped in Tiny Chains cardie or any of her cardies, she seems to always use the formula with rectangles. And what is that formula? Find a really pretty stitch and then make a lot of rectangles and put them together and you get a cardie. And you know what? It works really well. She doesn't waste time with button bands or any of that. On the other hand, I put this on before I attached the sleeves. And my husband said, I really like that. And even my son said, Mom, that's really good. So then I put the sleeves on and rolled them up. And my husband, in fact, said, don't even put sleeves. Just use it as a vest with slight sleeves on it. To be honest, I'm thinking very seriously of making another one and doing exactly that because that looked really nice with no pockets, no nothing, no edging. But at any rate, I did attach the sleeves. So basically, I got really into this project this past week that I finally looked at it after I recorded last week's episode and said, this really just shouldn't be here anymore. This is just too much. And I am between ASL classes, which is what stopped me before, that my hands were getting too sore from sign language to do crochet. Knitting doesn't seem to bother them, but crochet does. So I said, okay, I put it down. And then I said, I really got to get back to this before I go back to doing sign language classes. So that's what really prompted this. And when I took it all out, I said, okay, I've got the back finished. Now I have to finish that first front panel. And realized I already did that. I was on the second front panel. And then I said, good heavens, this should be really fast. And it pretty much was. It took me an evening to finish the front panel. I'm very slow crocheting. And it took me an evening for each arm and one evening to do both pockets. So we're talking 3 evenings after work here. This is not a hard project. And then I was all dragged down and I said, well, I hate to do seaming, but what I am going to do, it tells you step 1 on the seaming. Seam the tops of the 2 side panels to the back piece. So I thought, really, what is that going to be, 5 minutes, 10 minutes? So I did that, and suddenly I had, as one friend pointed out, this big serape. That I just had this, or I would say like a giant ruana. And I looked at it, I actually thought, could I leave it like this? To be honest, it really was a nice ruana, and there's work there for some designer. At any rate, so there it was, this beautiful ruana, and I said, oh, that's really great. And I thought, well, what do you do next? And next, you seam the side seams, but you have to leave room for the arms. And I said, pass. And I said, what else could I do? It said, well, seam the long seam on the sleeves before you attach them. I thought, sure. Well, what was that? Another 10 minutes? It was nothing. So now I've got these completed arms, and I've got the front panels attached to the back. So I said, well, what's next? And I thought, well, this is where it gets scary, doing that side seam and leaving room for the armhole. Actually, it doesn't. What I did was I took one of the arms and I laid it flat the way it would attach. And so I had the seam, the long seam on the bottom, so it'll be hidden underneath when I actually wear the sweater. And then I just had the top, which has no seam. So I laid it flat and put a clip at the very top and a clip at the very bottom in the seam. And then you can hear this one coming. I just clip that top clip to the seam at the top of the back that attaches a front panel. And then I clipped the bottom where on the arm that clip was running through the seam on the bottom seam. And I just clipped that down through both sides of front and back to hold them together. And of course what that does is it gives you a clip holding the front to the back where the arm will start. So then I just laid it all, I laid this all out flat on the floor to do all this. And so I went down the seam and smoothed the seam and, just basically lined up everything and clipped from the bottom of the sweater up the side seam. I clipped one at the very bottom and then I clipped one in the very middle. And of course I have the clip through the arm and through the front and back at the top. So there you are. There's your long seam and the arm is right there. So I seamed it. And then I made sure I stuck my arm through the last open part where the arm was going to go, where the crocheted arm would go. And as long as your arm fits through, you're doing great. So I did that, and then I thought, well, as long as I'm doing this side, let's see how it goes with attaching the arm. Attaching the arm, if you've ever sewed a dress or sewed a shirt or a blouse, it was very much like that I just worked my way carefully around it. Please keep in mind, while I'm doing all this, everything is inside out. So I'm going to turn it right side out when I'm finished. So I'm making sure all the seams are facing the right direction, are on the same side, And so I did that and got the arm in. And then I thought, well, wait a minute, that only took me like 12 minutes. And I was shocked. And so I did the other one. So suddenly there I am with this full sweater. Arms connected, seams all done. So all I needed to do was quickly single crochet around it. And no, that was too tight. So I ripped out everything until it was lying the way I wanted to lie when I put it on. And I will go back. And I think the first thing I'm going to try is just a bigger hook. So I think I'm using like an H hook on this, a G or an H, because I'm working in a worsted weight yarn. Actually, I think it's an Aran weight, but I'm using a G or an H. So I think I'll probably go back like an I or a J and just try a bigger single crochet and see if that lies flat. But that work, the remaining work on this is really brief, and I have to attach the pockets, but I don't want to attach the pockets till I get everything on the body lying nice and smooth and flat so I can see where the pockets will end up. I don't want one obviously like 2 inches higher than the other. So I have to tell you that, to my surprise, the Wrapped in Tiny Chains Cardi really came together this week. And you can see pictures of it. There's a picture of just all the pieces finished. There's a picture of me wearing the Ruana version of it before the sides are done. And then at the very top, there's a picture of me wearing it as it is now, waiting to put the single crochet edging all around the outer rim of it, which you do once everything is pieced together. And then I need to tack down those cuffs on the sleeve, which I just love. And then I need to add the little patch pockets on the outside. So there's another evening of work on this, and a very pleasant evening it is when something is so finished and it takes so little effort to just bring it all together. That did not make it easy to rip out all that edging. It isn't that much. It didn't take me that long. But it was disappointing because, like I said, I honestly figured I was going to wear it outside today, even if I hadn't tacked the cuffs or added the pockets. But no. So I believe I'm sitting on it. Yeah, I have something very cushy behind me. I have to tell you, too, I threw it over the back of the chair that I usually sit in when I record, and I noticed something very cushy is at my back. I have to tell you, this is a beautiful cardi to wear. This feels so fluffy and soft. This is an amazing cardi. And of course, I did it in that tedious, boring, neutral, now extinct yarn. I think it's Bernat, and it's acrylic crossed with cashmere. And it's really got very little cashmere. It's like 5% cashmere. You would never know it. The hand on this yarn is wonderful, including when you knit or crochet it into a fabric. So here we are. We're almost finished the Wrapped in Tiny Chains. Is it just wonderful? In the meantime, I'm still working on the Stash Toss, of course. So what is the count, you ask? We have 2 new skeins this year. I bought in the Knit Picks sale, the white sale, and they are for 2 different projects. One is for the planned mitts. I want to make Nordic mitts, and the other is for a planned bulky sweater that should be coming along really soon. So hopefully these will go out of the stash relatively quickly. In the meantime, I have knitted or crocheted through 11 skeins since the beginning of the year. Now, some things you should know. The skeins coming in were sport and bulky, and they may represent a lot of yardage compared to the 11 going out. The skeins going out were mostly Aran or worsted weight, I believe, a couple DKs. But I am sort of looking at the net changes without going into yardage, just looking at number of skeins, no matter how big or small the skeins are. Some of my 11 skeins were the acrylic cashmere I was just telling you about, and those are only about 110 yards, I think. So again, I'm not really being picky the way I measure this. Yardage in versus yardage out would probably be a better measurement, but right now I'm just looking for space in the stash. I just want a sense of how much buying do I actually do. How do I figure out what is yarn in versus yarn out? Well, yarn in is easy. you buy something that you see on sale or whatever, or that attracts you online. Skein for skein, that's it. 2 skeins in means I bought 2 skeins since the beginning of the year. Yarn out is a little trickier. I am trying to keep it at, I had to start the skein that I am counting as yarn out. I had to start working on it in 2023. And that was tricky because, again, I was using up scraps from Romule and all that. I did not count those. So those 11 skeins are actually 11 skeins that I've whizzed through, and most of them, let me tell you, were crocheting. So, this is not an exact science, but I just find it interesting to measure how much I buy versus how much I use in a year. Because I would like to liberate space in my study. I would like to empty out some of my giant storage bins. I don't need this many storage bins. It's getting hard to fit in the house with this many bins. And yet I'm really not doing that. And so I'm trying to look at why. What am I doing instead? The other thing that made me happy today was I did finally finish Romule officially, the Romule knit along, because I took all my extra woolies and I just dropped them off in a charity bin. That wasn't easy, kids. It was hard. I said goodbye to them as I put them in the bin. I told them I loved them and told them to go make someone else warm and happy. Not an easy thing to do. But I'm so glad I did it because it opened up space in my living room because I had them all on a shelf in the living room waiting to go. Meanwhile, what else? The Vestuary vest. I took a week off so that I could finish the chain sweater, but I'd really like to get back to it. I am a quarter of the way through it, and it is the 6th of February, and I do love me a new vest every February, and it's a very timely sort of thing because, of course, it's for the spring. And we're just at the beginning of spring here in Southern California. I know some of you are still buried in snow. And that's love to you, Nathania and Mary up in Minnesota. You brave, brave, brave women. And I don't envy you. I keep seeing pictures of that. Pretty horrifying. But nonetheless, it is great to finish a vest at the end of February. It gives you something nice and new and springy to wear, and of course at the end of February, spring is right around the corner in March. The lane splitter skirt, I have done no work on that, and I have done no work on the Pennsylvania Dutch embroidery. However, the don't know yet. Oh, I love my don't know yet. Let's see where I am. I am seaming the long seam of row 6 to join it to the bottom 5 rows, which are now a giant block. And I'm pretty much through it. I've got like 4 blocks of that seam left, but I have to also work the ends in for row 6. Every time I attach the long side of a completed row to the big ever-growing block of the finished blanket, I do work the ends in as I go because there's going to be a million of them if I don't. And you want to talk about making yourself run slowly mad. That would be the way to not do any of your ends till the very end. You would just have this giant ugly thing with strings all over it and you would give up. Well, maybe you wouldn't. I would. I would like this done by the end of 2023. I am very much in love with it. In the meantime, row 7, all the small seams are done. So I have a completed row 7 waiting to be clipped to the big blanket after I finish attaching row 6. Row 8 is now organized and clipped, so it is ready to have its small seams done. What else? I'm listening to the Instant Pot beep and thinking, what is that noise, if you can hear it? What else? Oh, yes. So, meanwhile, in the stash toss, I still have at my feet the little basket that I put all my scraps in when I was knitting the wonderful Romule sweater. The wonderful Romule sweater, you say? Yes, I've never worn it without somebody saying, wow, that is a beautiful sweater. These scrap sweaters, they're amazing. In the meantime, when I was at Stitches Southern California this past November, I ran into the ever wonderful Dizzy Blondes studios run by our own Laura, and I bought a bunch of her skeins. And in honor of the late Nichelle Nichols, you may remember she had done 2 colorways, Hailing Frequencies Open, which is a background of red, and then had blurbs of black and yellow. And another one called Reach for the Stars that is NASA blue with blurbs of yellow and green. And I knitted up, you may remember, the Hailing Frequencies Open, and I used the basic ribbed hat pattern from Pearl Soho, free online. And you can see all that in the show notes. You can click and you can see it on my Ravelry page for all that information. And as I was knitting Hailing Frequencies Open, weirdly enough, the colored blurbs on their own, without my intervention, formed the Starfleet insignia right down to proper colors in 2 locations on the hat. This freaked me out like I can't tell you, but now I'm thinking, well, if I knit up Reach for the Stars, what will I get? Am I going to get the NASA insignia? Will I get Nichelle Nichols' face? I don't know, man, but that first one is wonderful. So anyway, I just was looking at that box and said, I've got 2 skeins sitting there that are intended for hats. And I really should just sit down and make them into hats. So I pulled out the Reach for the Stars, and I did cast it on last night because I went to bed and was too restless to sleep. Now, if you had any sense, you would say, well, why didn't you just work on your vest or vestuary? And the answer is, it's dusty. I don't want to inhale dust as I'm trying to get to sleep, frankly. So I started knitting that up. So the Reach for the Stars hat, you can see a lovely picture next to my beloved Cognitive mug from Pauly Ceramics. But you can see it just sitting there with my needles dug into the very large, very full skein of DK weight that I bought in the colorway Reach for the Stars from Dizzy Blonde Studio. And you can also see the first few rows on the needles dug into the yarn there, just waiting for me to return and give them more love. Again, this is just doing little itty-bitty projects to get things out of my stash. I'm pretty happy about it. I have not done anything on the Lady Eleanor shawl, which is another knitted project. I really am looking forward to getting back to that, to be honest. But I did not want to let vestuary go by without making a vest. So you make a vest every February, you have a nice vest to wear, Okay, my favorite resources are in the show notes. What are they now? Lisa Susie Yarns, Webs for Supplies, Sierra Cottons and Wools if you happen to be in the Eastern Sierra, The Altered Stitch in Valley Village in LA, The Knitting Tree down by the airport in LA, Woolen Company online, Dizzy Blonde Studios, because I've just been mentioning their stuff, L'Atelier on Ventura, who I really, really like, and then Alpaca Direct that has some good supplies, and Birch and Cider for the custom leather tags that you all seem to love, which reminds me, I ordered new Birch and Cider tags, and I experimented a little more with what I could fit on them, no extra charge. You can get a lot on these things. So the latest ones have the outline of a cat, and underneath it, it says J.M. May Focket. J.M. made me in Latin, medieval Latin, not classical Latin. And then on the inside, there's a little stamp that says handmade. So I was approving online the proofs for this. I went into Etsy after Birch and Cider wrote to me and said, here's your proof. So I went and approved it and said, I just want you to know I love your work. Everybody asks about it. So I have been promoting you on my podcast, and they threw in a few extra ones, with these screws and everything for free. Thank you, Birch and Cider. That was an unexpected gift. I really wasn't trying to score off you, but I really appreciate you taking note of that. Again, this is Birch and Cider. The link is in the show notes. And it's for custom leather tags, and I really like these people. They're worth looking at, and apparently they're very kind on top of it. In Dizzy Blondes, nothing much. I am still working on my merino from Moro Fleece Works. I have a nano that needs to be unboxed. I'm just not in my spinning world. However, I am still brushing Minerva, a fuzzball a day. And that's very interesting because I spin it immediately because these are little tiny fluff pads. Seriously, they're not even the length of my thumb in any direction. However, I now have figured something out, and I'll get to this in the books. But as I spin these and basically continue spinning them on my drop spindle, which now has a lot of Minerva single ply on it, I have learned something interesting, which is I am actually spinning it as a means of storing it, that I could use it for felting down the road or other projects. So do not despair when you are saving things like this and you're spinning it. There still are other uses. Wrapping things on a drop spindle is a means of storage. So let's get on to the strategies. Here in the interpersonal strategies, I'm going to get to one of my favorites, which is apologies, how to apologize and when, and what the other person is listening for. This is really important to me because I did not know how to apologize for a large part of my life. My husband was never taught either. Neither one of us were taught by our families. Apologies are a very important topic. Even in DBT, it is taken on how to apologize. When we teach fast skills, we say, do not apologize falsely. But what we don't say is apologize correctly. And I have to say, this discussion is biased towards the English language. I think this does go by culture. And so I really wouldn't presume to say that a native Spanish speaker or a native French speaker or a native you name it speaker doesn't know how to apologize. And I wouldn't presume to say what their culture tells them about it. So I'm really talking out of my cultural background here as a middle class, primarily white, or certainly presenting as white, girl out of Italian Amish culture. Do with this what you will. The important thing is when somebody is offended with you, this is going to sound weird, but they're listening for the words, I'm sorry. And people get stuck on that. I've had people say to me, you need to apologize to me. They're really determined. And they mean by that, you need to say, I'm sorry. Now, my favorite part is where they're saying, you need to be sincere. Well, good luck on that. But the reality is, we don't apologize for something that we did not do. And that will take care of the insincerity issue. But people are listening for I'm sorry. Now, we know this because we cheat. We've all heard this. Well, I'm sorry you're such a loser. I'm sorry you're so hypersensitive. Of course, what you're really saying is, I'm not sorry at all. You're saying, I feel sorry for you, loser, because you have this bad personality trait. I don't think that's what they're looking for. But there is a way to say it honestly. So as part of the interpersonal strategies in DBT, in the acronym FAST, we have don't apologize if you don't mean it. Don't lie about an apology. But let's talk about how you do apologize, particularly when you want to make peace with somebody and you think it's a worthwhile endeavor. As I have said before, going into any disagreement, you really need to take a step back and think about the bigger picture. How do I feel about this person? What do I want our relationship to be coming out of this? Now, if you say, I feel they need to apologize to me, and we can't have a relationship if they don't apologize, that's a very primitive response. That's a very, in many cases, childlike response. I mean, if you're thinking that way, you really need to take a good hard look at who you are and how you manage relationships in the long run. And it goes the other direction. If you're saying, I'll say anything to make peace with them, again, you really need to look at your relationships. You've got some deeper level problems there. So you look at this person, and I'm just going to say it's your partner, and you're really upset. And you're thinking, he really hurt my feelings. I'm being a heterosexual female here. You're saying, he really hurt my feelings. And we can't get past this. Well, you have to remember, can you really? Do you want to? Do you need to? If you need to, then you need to calm down because you're in black and white thinking. It's this or goodbye. You don't say that unless it would have to be pretty serious what's going on here, okay? But in your typical disagreement. So you need to step back and remember at the end of the day, this person is family and you'd like this whole thing to end with them still being family. You're not ready to, in the vast majority of cases, to completely excise that person from your life. So you go into this thinking, we have to come out of this and still be able to be okay. So you can say to the person, I am very upset. And we use I statements. I'm very upset. And you can state what is wrong. I think you are not listening to me. I think you are interrupting me. I think you don't get my point. Whatever you're saying. Now, it's important that you are going to want to hear the words, I'm sorry, but I'm sorry for what exactly? And that's where it gets complicated. So let's say you're on the offending end. The other person says they've offended you. You don't say, I'm sorry you misunderstood, anything like that. What are you sorry for? This person tells you you've said something offensive and you didn't mean it to be offensive, or you didn't realize it was offensive. What do you say? You say, I'm really sorry because I didn't mean to hurt your feelings. That's probably the truth. So you can apologize for their distress. I'm sorry because I can see this really upsets you. I did not want to upset you. That's all true. You're not saying, I'm sorry I meant to hurt you. I'm sorry I deeply enjoyed hurting you and now I'm just going to fake that I'm sorry. You're not saying, I'm sorry you're oversensitive. You're not judging them in any way. You're simply saying, I'm sorry because this went wrong and I did not intend it. I'm sorry because I did not intend to hurt you. I'm sorry because I would not hurt you that way, or I did not mean it that way. Now, what is actually going on is a process of softening. When you're arguing with someone else, arguments go in a very simple structure. If I'm angry at you and I raise my voice to you, or I use a strong tone, I'm escalating. I'm now a little bit higher up the scale of distress. When you hear that in my tone, you are invited to escalate too. And when people do this, if I hear your tone as threatening in some way and I feel defensive, I will try to be even more threatening. So I will say something to try to one-up you that I think is even worse than what you just said. And so it goes. We keep one-upping each other. We keep going higher and higher up the scale of distress. At the top of that scale is violence, whether it's verbal violence or physical aggression. So we don't want to do this, okay? So when another person is escalating, when their voice is getting louder, their words are getting shorter, they sound like this, okay, just that sound, you know they're escalating. You feel yourself getting tense. Maybe you're clenching your fists or your jaw, or your stomach is hurting or getting tense. Okay, those are the marks of escalation. So the important thing is not to do that. So what can you do instead? Well, the terminology in psychotherapy is de-escalate, but what I'm going to say is soften. You want to soften. The other person is escalated. You love them and you think you want to resolve this. But at the same time, you're not going to admit you're wrong. So you soften. And so I say to you, you were so mean to me last night at dinner. I'm so angry at you. Okay, how would you soften that? Well, you might say, I'm sorry I upset you. I certainly didn't mean to. Okay? Now, you're not saying you did anything wrong. You're just saying, I'm sorry you're upset. Which you are. You regret it. You didn't come in here looking for an argument, yet this other person has escalated at you. So you're softening a little bit. Keep in mind that your face and your body language should reflect it. Well, I'm sorry you're upset. I didn't mean to. That won't work as well as, I'm sorry that upset you. I certainly didn't mean to. Now you're softening and you're giving them a little bit of room to move in. So they might look at you and they may say, well, I'm sorry too. I was really, really hurt. And again, they're trying to soften, but they're telling you they're really hurt. And you can say, I'm not sure I remember it that well. Maybe you should tell me what you think went wrong. Notice that nobody's judging. So you have to avoid the judging when you do this. But if you can soften when another person begins to verbally escalate, often they can soften too. Instead of going higher and higher and one-upping you on every statement, they will tend to slow down and listen to you. So the first trick when you're dealing with a disagreement is to practice softening. And softening often includes the words, I'm sorry, but it doesn't include, I'm sorry, I'm going to admit this thing I didn't do now, or I'm sorry that you're somehow flawed. Softening is, I'm sorry that there is this problem between us because I don't want it. That is the basis of softening and a reasonable apology. And the other person, if you're an English speaker, they're hardwired to listen to, I'm sorry. So much so, when you get somebody who's really, really personality disordered, they really have out of control personality defenses, you'll often get something funny back. Like, I can remember having a patient who says, you did this to me in session, blah, blah, blah. And it was very unreasonable. And I said, I'm sorry this has been so upsetting for you. Maybe we need to slow down and kind of look at this. And she said, oh, yeah, there you go. I knew you would apologize. That's all I wanted. When you groveled right now, that fixed everything for me. Now, that's pretty dysfunctional because I didn't grovel. And they're avoiding the discussion by saying, I don't need any more because you groveled, which I didn't. But what happened was they heard the words, I'm sorry. Even on someone who is very personality disordered, those words have an extreme effect. We really are hardwired for them in English. We have this kind of core belief, if I'm angry at you and you don't use those words, I'm sorry, well, then I just can't progress. I can't get over it. So I would tell you, this is a skill to practice, the appropriate I'm sorry. And in an appropriate I'm sorry, you don't judge the other person. You don't say, I'm sorry that you blank, blank, blank in a negative sense. You can say, I'm sorry you're so upset because I did not mean it. But again, you're coming back to, I'm sorry because I did not want to hurt you. And that is the core statement of an apology that works. I'm sorry because whatever is happening here, I did not want to hurt you. Now, if you did want to hurt somebody, you have to just say, I'm sorry, I should not have done that. But those are the two basic apologies. I'm sorry because I did not mean to hurt you. And the other one is, I'm sorry because I should not have done that. And at that point, you're giving the other person a chance to calm down and to soften instead of continually escalating. Notice, though, I will never tell you to apologize for what you did not do. Why? We do that often just to get out of a bad situation, particularly with an authority figure. It always bites you in the back. It never does work. Worst comes to worst, your boss is telling you did something wrong and you don't believe you did it. You want to try and get a deferment. You want the boss to soften and calm down, even if the boss is unable to talk to you realistically right now. You want to at least get them to soften enough to say, can we discuss this later when we've had a little more time? And sometimes you won't win. I mean, sometimes you can't get the other person to let go of it or to forgive you. But again, that's about being judgmental, and that is a whole different interpersonal strategy about being judgmental. Okay, so what are we talking about here? We're talking about how to apologize properly. The first rule is do not escalate with the other person. If they're going up, you want to get more calm. The second rule is when you apologize, you say, I am sorry, and you do not lie about what you're sorry for, and you do not get sarcastic, and you do not get judgmental. Generally, you're saying an I statement. I'm sorry because I did not mean to upset you. That is not the same as saying I'm sorry because I did that thing wrong even though I don't believe it. Okay, so the other rule is you don't lie in your apology, but you do try to soften, and that will allow the other person to soften. In the fluffy books, Crafting with Cat Hair by Kaori Tsutaya came, and this is translated in English from the Japanese. I had seen this before. I have to admit, and I can't remember, I said in a previous podcast, somebody pointed out that they had this at Powell's. You also can get it on Amazon. I had seen this before. This came out, I think, in 22 or 21, to very good reviews, that people were surprised that this is actually a fine book. It has a sense of humor about what it's doing. But it basically says you can use fur from your animals in projects. Now, this author is talking about cat fur, so you don't have it in large quantities. So basically she's felting it. She makes little finger puppets with it. She does some other interesting things. My personal favorite, she has little models that you can trace and cut out. And you can use it as a template. And it's cat-shaped. And you can lay your hair on it and needle felt until it is that shape. Or you can just needle felt a rectangle and then cut out the shape. Trace it on and cut it out. However you want to do it. But you can take that, and believe it or not, you can use that to patch your clothes. So you can use it to cover a patch, or you can use it to make a patch of felted cat hair to fix your clothes that's shaped like a little kitty cat. It's really cute. I have to tell you, these things are really cute. So believe it or not, I am going to strongly recommend Crafting with Cat Hair by Kaori, sounding like an English speaker here, Kaori, Tsutaya. And the link is in the show notes for the Amazon book. But this is a very clever book, very useful, and a lot of fun. One thing I would tell you, if you have cats and you have kids, teach your kids to brush your cats and save the fuzz. And you can go bananas on some rainy afternoon making these little projects with leftover cat fuzz. This brings back what I was saying about spinning Minerva, that I suddenly look at this spindle loaded down with Minerva fur that I've been collecting the last few months and realized that's a form of storage for cat hair. If you spin it, I can always unravel it or unspin it and just have fuzz and use it to make some of these adorable projects. So if you want to store your cat hair, Ziploc bags work, but so do spindles and spinning them. So this is Crafting with Cat Hair. Link in the show notes. I do recommend it. It is an absolutely fun book. I am back to Introduction to American Deaf Culture because that's the textbook for the course I'm currently taking. So we'll see how that goes. I am stalled in Lynn Messina's Beatrice Hyde Clare series, but I need to get back to it. I just got completely sidetracked by Maria Grace's Weird and Wonderful Jane Austen's Dragons series. And I'm having a lot of fun with those. They're very light. And I'm just listening to them at night in bed. And so I wake up partway through it and I just reset it the next day. Her style is a nightmare. Her organization in some of the books is messed up. You can tell she's just put things in the wrong order. I don't know if these were originally self-published or what. However, the author's name is Maria Grace, or Mariah, if you're British. And I don't know. She is not the writer she could be. What she is good at, she can plot. Sometimes she goes a little over the top. She is really devoted to two books, both by Jane Austen. The first is Pride and Prejudice. The second is Persuasion. She likes to play around with those characters, and basically she's writing fan fiction that is published, and I salute her. She's doing a great job. They're good enough to get me interested in. She's a very interesting reader of Austen, and there is a sense of teenage girl in the background. You have a feeling she read these books young, and she had a lot of fantasies as a teenager, and some of the books sound very close to it. What really impressed me, though, she can write an exciting scene. She develops a lot as she writes, and her early books are painful. Her later books are greatly improved. I've got no problem with that. I'd like to think everybody develops as they write. I think one of the problems she has had is editors. I don't think she's had particularly good editors until relatively recently. Nevertheless, the Jane Austen's Dragons series, it's good, silly fun, as I said last time. I'm still carrying the link for the free textbook on the Introduction to Cultural Anthropology. Someday I'll actually read that. Shoot, I continue to stretch every morning for about 5 minutes, 5 to 7 minutes, and I'm riding my stationary bike, and I'm having a lot of fun with that. I'm way out of shape, but it's really good. And again, I talked about motivation last week. This comes back to motivation. I'm really not that motivated to exercise, so I'm really just biking for a few minutes every day. But the sense is I'm doing something, and that's better than nothing. What is my motivation? At this age, 62, it's use it or lose it, kids. Something I really like. Well, you may remember a while back, I bought on Amazon this little case that had 150 locking stitch markers for crochet. They look like little safety pins in plastic. I got 150 for like $7. I think Knit Picks sells them. I think they're all over the place. Let me tell you something. Having seamed together parts of a blanket this week and also parts of a cardigan, I am here to tell you these things are a bloody miracle. When I first bought them, I said, who needs 150 of these? Turns out I did. Turns out the big blanket that I'm making from last year's one-a-day squares that don't know yet, yeah, I could have used 300 of them, to be honest. but 150 have carried me, and I'm using them every day. So the link is in the show notes to the ones I bought. None of them have broken, which surprises me. They're not that sturdy, but these things are really valuable, and having a ton of them, oh yeah. The other fun thing that happened this week, there was a sale on a limited edition colorway from one of my favorite clothing companies, that is Holy Clothing. Holy Clothing started out to make Ren Fair and kind of offbeat clothing for women in a plant in India, blah, 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 ethical sourcing, ethical employment, all that good stuff. And they've really exploded into basically women's clothing that's usually kind of medieval Renaissance oriented. So they have chemises, they have under and over skirts, blah, blah, blah. But they often come out with something that is just a solid wardrobe staple for me. And that has been their skirts and their vests. So my favorite thing they've ever made is the Emma skirt. It is basically a gored walking skirt in the Edwardian style with an elastic waistband. I bought one in blue several years ago, a royal blue. I love that thing to death. They had a sale in this soft pink, I guess I would call it a dark rose, really, colorway. And I went back and I bought the dark rose, and it said, you can have free shipping if you spend X. So I said, I'm going to spend X, and I bought the black. So I now have the rose and the black Emma skirts to go with my blue one. I cannot tell you how happy these have made me. I think it was about $148 total. I'm really happy because it introduced the concept to me of having a color theme in my clothing. So when I wear the blue Emma, I usually wear, not surprisingly, clothes that match it, and I sort of come off as blue. And I have a green skirt I made myself years ago, a circle skirt that I use for my green colorway. Well, suddenly I now have a pink colorway and a neutrals and black colorway, although I grant you the black could go with just about anything. I am having so much fun playing mix and match with these skirts. They are cotton. They are very nice to wear. They're tightly woven cotton. They're very nice to wear without leggings or anything, to wear in warmer weather. They're surprisingly good until it gets really hot. But I do like to wear them with leggings and wool socks and clogs, and you really can't see anything below the hem of these skirts. And I've been wearing them with my turtlenecks and my hand-knit sweaters and vests. These are a great wardrobe staple. It's true, I wanted to make some of these for myself. I wanted to make myself some more full circle skirts in my preferred doe suede or faux suede, or I would call it microfiber really, but it doesn't feel quite that oily. But at any rate, I was going to make myself some new skirts, and I realized I don't actually want to right now. I don't feel like I have the time, and I haven't been over to a fabric store to look for fabrics I would want to make a skirt in. And well, suddenly there were these skirts, and now I'm wearing them, and they're great. So something I really like this week is the Emma skirt by Holy Clothing. The link to Holy Clothing is in the show notes. Often you cannot buy these off the rack from Holy Clothing. You have to order them, and they take a few weeks to make them up and send them to you. Sometimes they are in stock. I just love them, and it is very worth having a slow roaming through the Holy Clothing catalog. The other thing they make I like a lot are some of their tunics that are just loose. They make tunics that just go wonderfully over your leggings, I'm just saying. Put a lid on it. The tea tastings continue. Nothing all that startling this week. I've been drinking some very neutral Harney stuff with vanilla in it, and I wasn't that exciting. What disturbs me is now that we are out of the pre-Christmas brouhaha and past Romule, I have suddenly lost the taste for pumpkin spice. However, it will make a nice iced tea this summer. Anything that doesn't get drunk up in the cold season gets redone into an iced tea in the hot season. So every summer I'm using up all my leftover tea in iced tea. And that makes me happy. You can see a picture of my beloved Cognitive mug. It shows up a couple times in the show notes for this episode. Really, I'm getting a lot of mileage out of it. But I had a lovely morning yesterday morning, Sunday morning, just lying in and sipping coffee in bed while knitting and reading. So, paradise. You can also see a picture of my keto lunch. I want to point out to you, if you can eat healthy fat, as I can, one of the great things about keto is the snackables lunch. So right there I have sliced salami and sliced cubed baby Swiss cheese and a lovely dill pickle because there's no sugar in it, chopped up. And I have to tell you that some days for lunch, that's all I want. It's just the raw Nibblies lunch with hot tea. It is one of the great advantages of the keto diet that you can eat that and not worry about your weight. On to the blather. Oh, ASL class. Well, it starts Wednesday night. I'm very nervous. By the time you hear this, I will have had a session of it. And I thought, well, I've got to go down to campus. And I've never been to the College of the Canyons campus to explore it in any way. It's a very strange campus. If you imagine boxes on shelves, that's the COC campus, except you have to stagger the shelves. It's built on all these hills, and essentially they just carved into them. So instead of rolling hills that you walk up and down, you're walking up and down a lot of staircases because they chopped off the top of one hill and put a parking lot. Then the next hill, they chopped even lower and put a building, and there's bridges and stairways and everything else. It's kind of an accessibility nightmare, although I did figure you could pretty much do it, but it would be challenging in a wheelchair. Let's put it that way, but it can be done. But I went down to look for my classroom. I am so glad I did. If I had tried to do this at 6 o'clock at night for my 7 o'clock class, I would have been in a cold panic. So I located the parking lot. I bought my parking permit for the semester. And then I explored and found my classroom and found the library. Fortunately, they're all pretty close together. And I stared in the classroom window and found the professor staring out with her eyebrows drawn together in a not pleasant way. And it looked like it was another section of the class I'm taking. We shall see. Either that or it was a Sign 101 because they were talking about a deaf cultural event. But at any rate, I did go do that. That was pretty exciting, so we'll see. Wednesday, well, I've already read the textbook, so I'm as ready as I can be. It's interesting because the teacher is deaf, so I also realized reading the textbook in advance is not what I need to do. I need to brush up on my ASL because I was trying to remember how to say pleased to meet you, which is a sort of stock phrase in ASL, and realized I can't remember it. I sort of remember it, so I have to go back. So, tonight and tomorrow night is going to be just revisiting ASL so I can say basic things to my deaf teacher. We're not required to. There will be an interpreter, but, it's just polite to do your best. In the meantime, the pup date, well, everybody is now scheduled for vet visits. I should include Minerva in this. She's got to go in and just have her annual. They saved her life, this particular vet, last year about this time. And so I was going to take her in and just get her booster shots. But I thought, well, I owe them. Maybe I'll pay them the extra money and we'll all be glad to show them how good she looks. Queenie is on the schedule to get neutered. Hooray. February 16th. We shall see. Captain is going in on the 20th to have her nose inspected and probably to renew her meds. And Blankets is just puttering right along, happy not to be involved in all this. So we have a lot of veterinary stuff coming up, but that will be very good. I am glad to be doing it. We also, as I think I told you, found a dog nose protector for lupus. I'm going to see what the vet thinks about that. We shall see. In the meantime, following faithfully behind all the dogs is the Hubs date. He's doing fine. Everything has been going well there. On the calendar, the Grand Canyon is still on for June 5th through 9th, and Sunnybank is on in August. We shall see. Finally, Minerva gets the last word, and the last word is brick yourself. What do I mean by that? When cats are content in cooler weather, they get onto a warm spot, and they pull their feet and legs and tail under themselves. And among cat people, the conventional term for this is bricking. They turn into a brick. So I have a picture of Minerva bricking on my chair last night as I sat frantically working on the Wrapped in Tiny Chains cardigan. And I noted that as I was desperately trying to finish this thing, she was becoming more and more like a brick. And I think if a cat could tell you anything, that's the advice it would give you, is sit in a warm place and snuggle up with yourself and turn into a brick and just work on your contentment. It doesn't seem like a bad idea when you look at it. I think the masters of this are dogs. Dogs don't brick. Dogs splay. We know from a wonderful series of books done in the 90s, when dogs are content, they show it by lying down and often by sleeping. Dogs just relax when they're contented and they go sort of semi-conscious. Cats can't really go semi-conscious, but they definitely do the brick thing. So Minerva's advice to all of us is to get bricked. In the meantime, I would say, everybody, please remember the typical precautions we live with these days. When you're in a crowded place, wear your mask. Always wash your hands, socially distance as you can, get all your shots. Most of all, the moral of the story here is everybody, please stay safe, take care of each other, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye. So we have come to the end of another episode of Cognitive. Please do not use this podcast to diagnose yourself. If you think you are having a mental health problem, please contact a licensed mental health professional. Show notes for these episodes can be found at cognitivepodcast, all one word, .blogspot.com. Episodes can be found at iTunes under the name Cognitive Podcast, but also can be found posted next to the show notes on the Blogspot page. Thank you so much for listening. Everybody, stay safe, take care of each other, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.